Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and in this video I want to discuss my favourite bosses in Final Fantasy XIV, and I'll invite you to share yours in the comments too. Disclaimer, I must point out there will be spoilers in this video for all content up to and including the 5.3 main scenario quest. So if you haven't beaten Heaven's Ward, Stormblood and Shadowbringers and so on and care about spoilers, click off now. Now the reason I'm making this is because I want to discuss what makes a boss, in particular in 14, feel good. I'll be ranking mine on a combination of story impact, gameplay mechanics, and music. Whilst of course these are subjective, I feel like maybe there'll be some common themes and overlap amongst the bosses, meaning perhaps we can quantify what makes a boss an enjoyable encounter for us. And on that topic, I invite you to share your favourite bosses. What is your favourite boss? And more importantly, why is it your favourite boss? What makes you enjoy that fight? That said, let's get to it. Number 5. Ramu Fulmination. It's very hard to just list 5 bosses if you think about how many trials, dungeons, raids and solo duties there are in the game, but I've roughly ordered them, well, starting with number 5 at Ramu. The level 50 version, a Realm Reborn version, was disappointing to me. The music was interesting, but better suited for background music than boss music, I think. The extreme version of the fight was quite tough back in the day, but nothing about it ever felt good to me. Now we have Ramu in Eden's Verse. Whilst from a story perspective there's not much to it beyond the Warrior of Light combining Ramu and Ixion into some horrific centaur man, the music is great and the mechanics are enjoyable. Note, I'm referring in this fight and for all others to the base mechanics, not any extreme, savage or ultimate versions. But Ramu was a fight where I felt like I understood it right away without any mechanics seeming convoluted or obtuse. Now of course with the orbs mechanic there was that slight carryover from the level 50 version, so if I hadn't done the level 50 version then maybe I would have been a bit confused, but you have to do the level 50 version anyway to get here, so it's fine. In general, it's always a fight I'm happy to participate in, whether I'm damage, tank or healer, although it's very fun as a ninja, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because you're hitting this thunder god guy with Rhytons, maybe. Speaking of thunder. Number 4. Thunder God Sid. The only alliance fight in my lineup, and the only fight wherein I'm not crazy about the music. But that aside, Thunder God Sid from the Evilist raids is my favourite alliance fight in the game, and I maintain it is the best in terms of mechanics and design. Although I will note, I'm recording this during the maintenance of 5.3, so who knows, maybe the 5.3 near raid's gonna have something amazing. There are a fairly high number of mechanics in this fight, but many of them are based on visual cues that aren't, for once, tied to orange cones on the ground, which I think is nice. Now I have nothing against the orange cones, the hit markers, but I love the way that the TG Sid fight works with visual cues. And of course I'm talking about the TG sword attacks, wherein you either move away, move towards, or like in between, and so on. TG Sid himself looks very distinct and has some very cool voice lines that add to the feel of the fight. I do think it was a shame they nerfed him a little, as I never really felt like he was overtuned, and nerfing him after everyone already had more than enough raw numbers from high eye levels just seemed like neutering the Thunder God for no reason. Number 3. Shinryu. Shinryu shares with TG Sid a perceived high difficulty that was remarked by many to be overtuned, especially at, launch, and I disagree. Most of this came from the number of mechanics, I think. Back when Stormblood released, Shinryu was Wipe City, whereas these days people will crack his tail in a second or two. Either way, I'm a big fan of this fight as I enjoy everything about it. Well, apart from Shinryu's design, because he's really gross looking. The music, the environment, the mechanics, I'm a big fan of them all. My only real complaint would be that the presence of Xenos isn't really felt too strongly throughout the fight, and it's at times easy to forget you are effectively fighting him more than Shinryu. Number 2. Shiva, Refulgence. Our second Eden boss, and our second redo in a sense. The original Shiva fight is one I'd rate far higher than the original Ramu fight, but the Eden Shiva is definitely one of my favourites. It has a nice story angle, if not a huge one, the music is great, and I love all of the mechanics, although I'll admit, I still get Axe Kick and Scythe Kick mixed up, and there's like a 50% chance I'm gonna forget which one is which. And the Mirror Mirror mechanic, yeah, I'm kinda stupid and that one often hits me just because I forget what to do. But I really enjoyed this fight, and if I had any complaints, I suppose it might be for the lengthy cinematic near the end, but frankly, I never really hate it. It just gives me a moment to rest my fingers, or Alt-Tab. Good mechanics, a visually pleasing fight, and one that is fun for all roles, with a nice story hook. The don't look at magical girl transformation gaze mechanic is comedic too. And finally, number 1, Tsukuyomi. It's hard picking 5 bosses, as I said, it's harder to rank them, and harder still to pick a number 1, but ultimately it has to be Tsukuyomi, the final boss of Stormblood, or well, Shinryu is the final boss of Stormblood's leveling content, Moon Bunny is the final boss of Stormblood's patch content. Everything about this fight just feels right. The music is great, the mechanics are well tuned and complex enough while still being easy enough to figure out, and it really ties up the story of Stormblood just right. Whilst I do think Heaven's Ward is better than Stormblood when it comes to the overall story, Stormblood features a lot of great moments, and the Moon Bunny Tsukuyomi encounter is the icing on the cake. The lyrics of the song, the mechanics of the fight, it all meshes together perfectly. It is the thematic finale of Stormblood, whereas Shinryu was the finale to the Xenos arc, but altogether not too intrinsically tied to the overall themes of Stormblood, at least in my opinion. It always felt a bit disjointed to me, like you could stick Xenos in Heaven's Ward and he wouldn't be completely out of place, he's just there. It is a bit of a shame the fight's environment wasn't too exciting, but that's the only complaint I have, and it's a bit of a nitpick. But what about you? Favourite bosses? What makes them your favourite? Are there any bosses you hate? For me, well, it has to be the bird fight in Eden's Verse. I cannot stand that fight. And it doesn't help that you're effectively fighting a giant light bulb that you don't even look at for most of the fight. I don't like the design of the boss, I don't like the mechanics, I don't really like the music all that much. It's the definite worst fight for me. And it's a shame because I love every other fight in that tier of the raid. And well, what about 5.3's boss fight, the final boss of Shadowbringers? It's hard to rank that, seeing as it's not out at the time I'm writing this, but thanks to the magic of editing, it's out now. So let's talk about it briefly, and to reiterate, spoilers, as this is very recent. So, initial feelings on the new bosses in 5.3? None of the near bosses really stood out as great to me, although they were fun encounters and I liked some of the mechanics. The new weapons fight was really cool and I enjoyed that, simple as it was, the sapphire weapon that is. But the real meat comes from the new story fight, and again, spoilers for 5.3 if you haven't cleared it. Still here? So the Warrior of Light fight. I think I enjoyed it more than Hades, but is it enough to get into the top 5? Too soon to say. Right now I'm thinking not going to be new number 1. I enjoyed the blending of active time maneuvers and other mechanics that we've seen before, and the stationary fire, mobile ice, and the various Warrior of Light themed abilities he brought out. He had some paladin abilities, he had, excuse my pronunciation, Confiteor, however you pronounce that, he had Hallowed Ground and stuff like that, which was really cool to see. And him pulling out a Limit Break 4 was very cheeky too, because aside from guessing that you'd need your own tank limit break, there wasn't really much warning. After all, what other content in normal difficulty requires a limit break? Alexander Prime? I think that's about it, and technically that is an optional fight, it's not part of the main scenario quest. So this is the first time you've needed it in the story for a long time. Overall, it was a great fight. The music, I don't know, maybe it will grow on me. I didn't dislike the music, but I didn't fall in love with the music either. Overall, I think perhaps Shadowbringers has relied a little too much on I don't know what you can call it, the Shadowbringers motif, or that one Shadowbringers theme gets remixed like all the time, it feels like, in like all of the big fights, which is fine, but I'd rather have a little more variety, and it was still a nice piece of music. But really, I'm gonna have to wait and see how I'm gonna feel about it in the future. But first impressions, I enjoyed it. What did you think about it? Let me know. And until next time, you guys take care. Ciao.